Hello everyone, 8-Foot Cat here. I'm going to tell you a story. When I was about 18 years old, I went to visit my father in West Virginia in a small backwoods town. Not a lot going on in this town, but there were a lot of cool shops that had antiques and things that you just don't see everywhere. I checked out all the different shops and found all the cool stuff that I had never seen anywhere before. And much like anywhere that's you've been before that has antiques, it was not only a fun experience, but an educational one. At one point, I found another shop that really caught my interest. It was a shop that did metal refurbishing. I walked around, looked at the various sculptures and statues, and thought to myself, how could all this cool stuff never be seen in this little town, far away from everybody? At one point, in the very back of the shop, I found a door knocker. A very hideous door knocker. A door knocker that seemed to be in the image of the devil. For some reason, I could not walk away from this particular item. All the other cool things in the store didn't compare to this door knocker. I picked it up and I blew all the dust off of it. It was covered in dust. I brought it to the counter. It had like a $30, $40 price tag on it. I had $10 on me. When I brought it up to the register, the man at the register had a very strange look on his face, as though he couldn't believe that I wanted to buy it. I set it on the counter and I said, "This thing is amazing. I have $10. Doesn't look like anyone has shown any interest in it in a long time." And before I could try to get him to sell it to me for a cheaper price than the tag, he looked at me, he smiled and said, "Sold." I then kind of felt a little apprehensive as to why he was so quick to sell this item to me. So I asked a question about it. I asked what he knew about it, if he knew anything about where it came from. And he said, "Well, a man in his 80s had brought it into the shop one day about 6 years ago. Claimed that it was evil and that he wanted it cleaned and he wanted it sold and he wanted out of his life. And that the shop would be happy to make money for this man and sell this item." So they cleaned it all up, they shined the metal, they made it look like new again. According to the shop owner, a week later, the old man passed away. So this door knocker became a possession of this shop. And it sat on those shelves for those 6 years and collected dust. During the time it was in the shop, they claimed to have had a lot of strange things happen that they couldn't explain. Hearing whispers in the hallway, hearing voices as though there was someone there when there wasn't anyone there. Well, I paused, but I gave him the $10. I brought it home. I hung it on my bedroom door. And that was the beginning of a nightmare. I too heard whispers that I never heard in the house before. I would sometimes get strange feelings that there was some type of evil entity in my bedroom while I was sleeping. At one point, I tried to have a sense of humor about it. I took it to some friends of mine that had a workshop, and I drilled the eyes of this devil-faced door knockers out. I then took an umpire mask, and I had this door knocker welded to the umpire mask so that it could now be worn as a mask and you could look through its eyes. It was quite a creepy sight. I tried to make a sense of humor about it, try to not be afraid of the energy that this thing carried. We made a few films back then when I was younger, kind of just goofing off. And those films, every time I had that mask in a film, I would say a line, we would record it, and then when we would play it back, I would be saying something other than what I was saying when we recorded it, as if it changed my words or something. The mask itself haunted me for a long time. I would hear strange noises. I began to cover it with a piece of cloth and not let it be exposed. And that seemed to quiet it down. And I didn't feel as strange about it. For many years, I kept it covered up, locked away in a trunk, and I didn't really think too much about it. One Halloween, I had a large party. I had it hanging up and covered over with this cloth at my new home. During the party, a friend of mine had been looking through some of my things and found the mask, still welded to an umpire mask. He decided to put it on and wear it around the Halloween party and frighten the other guests at my party. At one point at the party, a fight broke out amongst close friends that don't ever fight. And the people involved in that fight were myself and another person that had been walked up on by our friend wearing the mask and startled by it. We ended up in this rage of a fight, and we really afterwards didn't really even know why we were fighting with each other. But I felt then, and I knew then, that that mask had something to do with it. The following days after the Halloween party, that mask began to whisper again in my home. I could hear it down the hallway when I would go to bed. I could hear it saying things like, "Let me outside. Let me see the sun again." I had a shed outside with a big old wooden door, and I thought that would actually be a really cool place to hang it outside. It would look cool. So I went ahead and I hung it out on this shed. At that point, I think that it was trying to possess me, maybe. It was getting into my thoughts. Every night I would hear whispers outside of the house now. I had a very bad feeling about this mask. It seemed to have some type of motive that I couldn't understand. At one point, a friend of mine came to town to visit, and he didn't like that mask. He never liked that mask. And when he saw that I had it hanging up on the shed, he scolded me for it and told me that I was making a mistake by releasing that thing from being covered up for all those years, that I was releasing something evil into my life. I had had a series of events which I will cover in another story that tie into this mask. One point, my friend talked me into taking the mask down to a local bridge and throwing it off the bridge into the water. And I told him, I thought that was a great idea. Let's get rid of it. But whenever it would come time for us to get in the car and go down there, I would forget about the mask. And my friend again scolded me, saying that something wasn't right, that I was maybe being possessed or something, because it was almost like I wanted to protect the mask. I didn't want it to be thrown in that river. And at one point he just got angry and grabbed the mask, took it, ripped it down off of the door. And he said, we're going and we're doing this. We're going to throw it into the river, off the bridge. And we did exactly that. I haven't had any more whispering or strange sounds in my life since. And I always wondered if someone fishing off that bridge were to reel that mask in, if they would bring the whispers of evil into their life, like I had done at one time. Thank you for listening. This was the story of the Devil's Doorknocker.